Hello and welcome to the On the Ground podcast with the Property Baron. This is where we chat with local real estate agents who are actually out there doing the deals on the ground across Noosa and the Sunshine Coast, the people who really know what's happening in the market right now. I'm Jason Barron. Today I'm joined by Rory Williamson from Williamson Co based in Noosa. Rory's been selling in the local market for some time now. We've seen him grow his team over the years. He always seems to attract some really good people to his team. Away from real estate, Rory's also known around town for his on-stage performances. Welcome, Rory. Great to have you on.
G'day, Jason. How are you, mate? How you doing? That was quite an intro. Thank you.
There you go. I could have kept going for a lot longer.
Very good, mate.
So, no, it's really good to have you here. One of the nice guys in the industry around Noosa. We love dealing with you guys. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your background and kind of what got you into real estate in the early days?
Yeah, look, we were from Bondi in Sydney, and I was in a very different industry in the arts. And on the side, I was flipping little Art Deco units in Bondi back in sort of 2012. And I had a real interest in architecture. And, you know, I think I watched one too many of those reality shows where they made it really look easy to flip a house. It is actually quite difficult and a lot of work. And then we had a family, wanted more space. We looked at Byron, we looked at the Central Coast, and then we landed on Noosa and just thought, what an absolute gem. Let's move up here. My parents were here. A couple of our friends had moved up, but the reality was what we did in Sydney, we couldn't really do up here. So it was a full tree change, career change. And I thought, well, look, if I'm flipping houses and I love architecture and everything, why don't I try and sell them? So got into it that way. And we had a family connection with one of the big teams on Hastings Street who were kind enough to give me my start, and they taught me the ropes, and they'd been around for a very, very long time. So there was a lot to learn in a very quick amount of time, and God bless them, they were fantastic. And very grateful to have had them early in those early days. Yeah.
Very good. A lot of people make the career change and don't become successful, but you've been very successful since you've been doing it. So well done. Over the years since you were flipping, what do you think are the biggest changes that you've seen from then to now? Why do you think it's harder?
Look, I haven't flipped since about 2013, 14, but I know a lot of flippers out there, and look, it's just the obvious things like the cost of materials, labor is just so expensive now. I mean, we've seen people who had quotes in 2016 to sort of add a room, and they've got the quote again today, and it's 4 times more expensive than it was back in 2016. So it's just wild what's happened, and we're seeing a lot of people pulling out of renovations and selling their renovators to move into something that's actually done and finished. So if you have those skills and you can do it at a lower price than someone that doesn't have those skills, you're onto a winning formula.
Yeah, it certainly has changed a lot. I think these days you probably need to be producing a product that's a lot more high spec than maybe you needed to do 10 to 12 years ago, which also has its extra cost as well, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a premium being paid now for beautifully finished homes. People they just don't want to go through the hassle and the unknowns of cost. Yeah, they'd rather just unpack the suitcase and move in.
Yeah, we see it all the time. You've got to try and avoid that Noosa tax with the builders as well. Things get a bit more expensive in Noosa, as we know. So tell me, what do you like the most about working in real estate and doing your job?
Look, it's a pretty special community up here, and I've got mates who work in real estate in Sydney. It is very cutthroat down there. It is up here as well, but there is a community of agents up here that regularly get together and have discussions and share ideas, which is kind of rare, I would have to say, in the industry. I always try and not have a bad relationship with any other agents. I make a point of, I just think a lot of time is wasted where agents have beefs with each other when they could actually be on the phone making a deal happen. I just think it's just not worth it, really. So there's a good vibe up here amongst the agents. It's a small town. If you do the wrong thing, it gets around pretty quickly. So yeah, there's an unwritten sort of rule up here that we don't step on each other's toes. And if you do, then it can get a little more tricky with a number of agents knowing about it pretty quickly, you could say.
Yes, we've heard about a few not so great phone calls from agent to agent over the years. I could never see you causing a beef with another agent though, Rory.
No, I try not to, mate. I try and stick out of it. Yeah, but look, the other part is you're selling the lifestyle up here, and most of your buyers up here are lifestyle buyers. You know, occasionally you get people going, "Oh, look, the yield's not good up here." I try and explain to them that you're really not buying in Noosa for rental yield. You're really buying for capital growth. And if you want yield, you know, try a mining town, try something where the buy-in is a bit cheaper and you can get, you know, a big return. But yeah. So it's, you know, you're selling the dream up here, and it's really not that hard to sell it because on a sunny day in Noosa, it's a pretty easy sell. And people generally want to buy up here to sort of move here one day. It might be in a couple of years, it might be in 2 decades, but sort of urge people to get in now. And people look at other areas on the Sunshine Coast, and I sort of talk to them about all the restrictions and the things that we have in Noosa that's going to keep it a very special place over the decades. You know, height restrictions, bedroom caps, national parks everywhere. There's not a lot of land to be built on, and the land that is there to be built on has some pretty heavy restrictions on it. So supply is always going to be an issue in Noosa, but the demand will always be there. And we all know what happens when demand's there and supply runs out. So yeah, it's a pretty safe bet for anyone investing regionally in Australia. I always say it's probably safer than Byron. It's probably safer than Mornington Peninsula because of those restrictions. So people sort of go, oh, you know, I get that idea, and that usually helps them, you know, make the decision. Yeah, so it's a great place to do business. It is highly competitive from a real estate perspective. I remember moving up from Bondi, and I looked at all the agents in Bondi, and I was given my first farming area was Sunshine Beach. And from Sydney, and I'd been here, you know, because mum and dad lived here, and Sunshine Beach, they were in Sunshine Beach. And I thought, oh, I've hit the jackpot, you know, my farming area is Sunshine Beach. And I'll never forget walking down the main strip of Sunshine Beach, and there were more real estate agencies than restaurants. And I just went, oh, shit. I mean, I've been thrown in the deep end here, and I had to just swim. Or you know, I wasn't going to make it. I mean, back then there was Rose Callahan, there was so many more agents. Karen was in there, you know, it was just select, you know, it was just littered with agencies. You know, Century 21 was there. It was, yeah. So
I do remember that. I remember when you jumped in and you were working with Brendan at the time. How long ago was that?
Yeah. I started I think about 6 months before Brendan, and then Brendan came in, we teamed up, and we had the Eastern Beaches, and we had to work really hard to sort of, you know, get listings. It was so competitive. But yeah, long story short, there's more agents in Sunshine Beach than Bondi Beach trying to sell property, and there's less property in Sunshine Beach. So you do the maths.
What a lot of people don't realise is how few properties there are that actually sell through the region, right, in Noosa.
Exactly.
There's a lot of really good agents that come to the area from being successful somewhere else, and very high standard of real estate agent. If you can come in and crack it in Noosa like you have, you've done well.
Yeah, it's not easy. And I think that's a lot of people come up here because there aren't a lot of industries. I mean, you've either got to go into tourism, hospitality, maybe construction to a lesser extent, or real estate. I mean, they're the key, or retail. Really, there's not a lot else on offer. So you see a lot of people come up without a job going, oh, I'll just come up and get a job. It'd be great. And they really struggle because the salaries are not as big up here as the big cities. The opportunities are less. So, you know, you've got to have some money under your belt or be able to work, you know, make a living from your laptop, really, which a lot of people have done since COVID, which has changed the dynamic up here as well.
I think that's a real shift in the market over the last 10 years, because I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, the GFC saw the market in Noosa drop quite a lot, but it was because a lot of the investors went and sold. But through the COVID boom in Noosa, it's people moving up here, working from home, businesses based somewhere else. It's been a real trend for the owner-occupiers to come in and actually bunker down and create a life for themselves. It's
Precisely,
completely
mate.
changed.
Absolutely. And that's the other selling point of Noosa now. When people, and it's the first question people will often ask me, like, oh, but what about the GFC, Rory? I mean, they lost 30, if you had a property over 2 million back then, it was a 30-40% drop. And I said, correct, it was. But the dynamic has changed dramatically up here. I've never seen so many prams, in Sunshine Beach. I've never seen so many young families in Sunrise on the eastern beaches. The first thing you get rid of in a depression or a economic downturn is the family boat or the family holiday house. And back then, Sunshine Beach, the eastern beaches, it was a lot of holiday homes. It was like a very transient town, Sunshine. In off-peak seasons, it was like a ghost town because there were all these people with holiday homes.
Yeah.
Then COVID happened and it completely switched. And the last thing people get rid of in an economic downturn is their principal place of residence. They'll get rid of everything else, the cars, the boats, the holiday houses, but they'll just retain that principal place, which is now propped up Noosa Shire because we've got all these people that moved from Sydney and Melbourne that bought their principal place of residence here. So I think the days of those 30-40% drops are over. I'm optimistically saying that. You never say never, but when you look at the worst downturn in the history of Australia, the Great Depression, 1933, the median price point in Australian property only dropped 15%. Now that's pretty impressive. I don't think other parts of the world could claim that. And it just goes to show, how important property is for Australians.
It's a really important point you make. So we were at a team meeting the other day, and we're talking about, the fallout from the budget. And we talked about some of the worst drops in prices being double digits, 10% or more, which has barely ever happened in history. And you look at the property market in Brisbane and some of the other areas through southeast Queensland, in the last 12 months, they've gone up by, 14, 15%. Parts of Brisbane, 19, 20%. So if we have a downturn where there's a correction and drops 10% in a year, which is likely not going to happen, but even if it does happen, the media is going to talk about all the doom and gloom, but realistically, it's only gone back to the price it was 12 months ago. What's a big deal?
Yeah,
and it's probably not a bad thing because the prices are just getting a bit ridiculous and have been for a while now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of buyers will read, and I talk from experience, that they read a lot of American property gurus' predictions for Australia, and I just kind of go, guys,
Kiyosaki?
Yeah. Like there's going to be a great, crash in Australia because they're using the same parameters as the American market, but we've got a completely different market here, and I've seen people that do this and then they miss buying and then they miss the market and then they're renters for life. And it's like, if you've got, my advice is if you've got the pre-approval, if you've got the money, just get in, get in. And if you can afford it, get in because, the Australian property market would have to be one of the safest bets. If you look at history, if you look at the ups and downs of every market in the world, Australia's pretty buoyant, compared to a lot of the others.
We are in quite a unique spot in Noosa where the supply and demand equation is probably going to underpin the value for a lot longer to come. Interestingly, what I sort of suggest to some people that are hesitating is that, I don't know what you're finding, but a lot of the clients that we take on and other buyers buying in the markets that we're in from Pigeon Beach, Sunshine Beach, Sunrise, Noosa, the whole area, a lot of them are paying big money for some of the properties, but for the people that are buying those properties for multiple millions, it's probably not a lot of money to them. So I think there's a lot of money coming into the area, a lot of people moving to the area that have got businesses based elsewhere, and people think that prices have gone through the roof and it's becoming so expensive. But for the people that are moving there that are buying these properties, they're probably selling something worth way more in Sydney or Melbourne or maybe even overseas. And it's not a lot of money for them the people that are actually buying.
Yeah, look, I still think there's value up here for those Sydney Melbourne and even Brisbane now, it's getting some crazy, high-end prices at the top of Brisbane. I think the value equation is still there for those buyers. Yeah. I mean, we've had Sydney buyers who, selling in the eastern suburbs for, selling a terrace house in Bronte for $9.2 million. You're sharing two walls.
Yeah.
And you've got no ocean view, and you're paying $9.2 million for a terrace house in Sydney. And then you come up here and you go, oh, I can get for half the price. I can get a big house, ocean view. Some of them fairly newly constructed. It's there's value when you look at it that way. Yeah. Definitely.
So just, I guess, to change the subject a little bit, what do you, when you think about buyers that you're seeing whenever you're showing your homes on a regular basis, what do you think the things are that they get wrong consistently?
Yeah, we sort of touched on it before, waiting for the big drop. That's never going to happen. I think that's a big problem. And I've read this and I've read that and it's happening. I'm just going to wait. And then they wait and then, they miss it. Having said that, I think maybe there is an opportunity on the horizon, probably in the next year and a half, where, everyone's saying there'll be a 10% drop, others are saying 5 to 3%. We don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but it'll be somewhere in that vicinity. But does it make it that much easier to get in the market, even with a 10% drop? Probably not. A little bit, but I think if it's the problem I see often is long-term buyers of principal places of residence, a home, a place to live in. They are waiting for this opportunity that may never come, and I just think it's worth. If you love it and you're going to own it for 10 plus years, just secure it. But there'll be some good opportunities over the next 6 to sort of year and a half, 18 months, I think.
I hope so. Sometimes you find when the market does sort of plateau a bit or drop by a little bit is that stock really tightens up and people don't want to sell. So that's also another factor to play.
This is it. And I think, honestly, a lot of people are still getting their head around all the budget changes, negative gearing and everything. And we're trying to educate people too and say, well, yes, negative gearing's gone for now, but you can claim all your expenses when you go to sell the property. So there is some form of negative gearing still there. There's a lot of stuff to get your head around. A lot of clients of ours are just sort of saying, look, we're going to have to reevaluate everything. We're just going to have to understand what's on the horizon and has it gone through yet? And will it stick around? Will the next government bring it all back around? So there's a lot of, and in times like that of drastic change, people tend to just sit on their hands and sort of wait and go, well, I'm just going to see how this pans out.
Yep.
Before I make a move, which creates a stagnant sort of environment where, there isn't a lot of stock. There's nothing. And agents are battling to get stock out there. So that can actually prop the market up because there's not a lot to choose from and people compete for what's there. So, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Will all these changes be reverted back when there's a change of government? Maybe not all of them, but probably a lot of them will revert back. So when is the best time to buy? Maybe you wait for the bottom of what's about to happen, and then with the knowledge that in 3 to 4 years, it may all revert back.
Problem with that is that when we realised that it was the best time to buy, generally it's 6 months too late, and you look back at it and you say, hey, that's where it was the best time to buy.
Yeah, I know. You can never truly pick it. And that's why I say to people, just get in. Just make the move. And in 10 years, you'll look back and go, we could have waited 3 months and made another 10 grand, but at least you're in. It'll
be interesting to see how it all pans out. We've been obviously analysing and thinking about it a lot. And I think locally with the capital gains tax changes after the budget, the thing that keeps coming back to my mind is the fact that there's probably some investors that are holding properties in Noosa. They could be units, not owner-occupied houses that they may have been thinking about selling over the next 2 to 5 years, and they might bring that forward and sell it, sooner rather than later, because the longer they hold it for, the more they're going to pay at the new capital gains tax changes. So we might see a bunch of stuff come forward, possibly the investment stock in the units. But like you said, no one knows. It's just speculation for now. So we'll see how that all plays out. What?
Yeah, yeah, and it could be a very different landscape in 3 years. So it's really hard to plan for that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unknowns, but yeah, yeah, and I think it's exciting for developers because there's a bit of an advantage now for new product. Not only there's the ability to negative gear, but international people can buy new products. We had a French couple who fell in love with the property, couldn't buy it. They can't. They've extended I think it was 2027, now it's 29, that internationals can't buy established property. It's got to be off the plan. It's got to be new.
Yeah, for sure. And that just doesn't help the situation, pushes prices up first too, right?
Yeah. And look, there isn't a lot of new stuff being built in Noosa. There's just not a lot of land. There's not a lot of, zoning, high density zoning. So it's those that do have that opportunity are going to be, in a good place. I think new properties will do really well, especially in Noosa where there's none.
Yeah.
Or basically none. Yeah.
Rory, what is the most, I guess, surprising or interesting sale that you can think of that you've done? Price, property, buyer, whatever it might be. Why don't you tell us a little story about something interesting that's happened?
Yes. Well, I had one fairly recently. It was pending the sale of two properties. One in Noosaville, one in Tasmania. So we had to work with a Tasmanian agent in order for them to secure a waterfront property in Noosa Heads. So it was very or Combi Place. Yeah. So it was a tough one. We had to it was a juggle, mate. We had to get very friendly with this Tasmanian agent and put a lot of trust into him, and he did an amazing job, got it done in record time, and then we had to get ours done, and we had to get a really good price, and we had to get premium prices for both sales for this other sale to go through. So, and look, there's a lot of it happening at the moment, and it's a sign of the times that I always say to people, there's 4 offers that you'll get. Now, 4 cabs that come off the rank. Number 1 is a cash offer. That's at the top. Number 2 is an unconditional offer. They've sold their property, but it's unconditional. It's almost as good as cash. The third guy off the rank is, pre-approved. The LVR's, pretty good. It's almost as good as cash. They're all ready to go. And then the last offer that you really want is pending the sale of another property. Because there's just so many unknowns. You don't know how long it's going to take for that other property to sell. It's a very hard one. So we had, not only did we have 4th cab off the rank, we had to sell 2 properties, one not even in the state, but the offer was so good that we had to take it. We had to go for it, and it all worked out. It all played out. But my God, it was a juggle.
I know the market in Tasmania has been a little bit slow too, so that would have been a bit daunting.
Yes, it was, mate. It was. But it was the offer that our vendors wanted to take. So we had to do our very best to make it happen. And luckily it all played out. But that'd be one of the most memorable, mate. One of the most memorable, I'd say.
Very good. So name a local street or a pocket area of a suburb that you think is undervalued or overlooked.
I can't tell you because I want to get in on the street, mate. It's gonna. No.
You're on the record and we're going to hold you to
it. Yeah. Look, it's a question I get asked all the time. Everyone's like, okay, Rory, I've got some money to invest in Noosa. Where do I go? Where's my money best spent? I guess when I started in 2016, that the areas that I've watched grow exponentially are 2 areas where you look at the buy-in price, you look at what they're selling for, and you just go, holy moly, that's astronomical. So Little Cove obviously is one of those areas, and Noosa Waters has had a good run as well. Many areas have. Sunrise Beach, which I just looked at the other day on PropTrack, a phenomenal stat for Sunrise was that over the last 10 years, or actually 2015 to 25. So over the last 10 years, they did a study of all the suburbs in Australia which had the highest median average growth annually over the last 10 years. There was one suburb in Melbourne, in the outskirts near Mentone, that I think it hit 15% on average every year for 10 years. And then the second suburb in all of Australia was Sunrise Beach at 14% annually for 10 years on average. Astronomical. Anyway.
Are you surprised, though? Because we've seen over the years, 10 years ago, no one knew what Sunrise Beach was or where it was. It was
it was known as
sister to
Slumrise.
Sunshine. Yes, it was.
Yeah, Slumrise. And now it's just phenomenal. But in terms of streets, I'll give you one. And this is why I mentioned Little Cove. So as the crow flies, Little Cove's probably the hottest property area you could buy. It's very expensive now, but if you bought there 15 years ago, you'd be laughing now. But as the crow flies from Little Cove, you fly 700 metres behind Little Cove, you're on Noosa Hill. It's 700 metres, yet it's Little Cove is 4 times, 5 times sometimes more expensive than Noosa Hill. That flow-on effect, there is a street, Atunga Heights is my pick every day of the week. It's still undervalued. It's got a beautiful little bush track at the end of the road that goes down to Main Beach. You can get to Main Beach in 3 or 4 minutes from Atunga Heights. No one knows about the footpath there. I've just told you, but there you go. Houses have gone up there a lot, but 2 or 3 years ago, they're selling an apartment on Atunga. I think there was a little too better for under $1 million. And I was just like, holy moly, that is great buying. Now they're 1.6. So some, people have cottoned onto it, but I still think even a buying little apartment on Atunga Heights, anywhere on that street is golden. You got to think Angler Street is right behind it. They're selling houses there for $16 million. If you can get an apartment on the street in front of it for 1.6, 1.4, it's got to be a good bet, and getting any house on that street is golden.
What do you think, Rory, separates the best agents from everyone else, and is it teachable?
Honestly, the thing that separates the best agents from the ones that don't do so well is, I hate to say it, but doing the boring stuff, doing the stuff that's hard. I listen to a lot of, real estate agents that have their own podcasts and sort of the real estate gurus. But I think he summed it up really well. One of these guys, he goes, look, we're just highly paid telemarketers. I said, what? And the way he explained it is, it's the guys that do, get on the phones, prospect, and have a regular time every day, usually in the morning, that get out there and talk to their 400 VIPs that they love to work with. And another one said, look, you're not going to be everyone's best friend. You're just not going to click with some people. It's just not going to work. But there will be people that you have some connection with, some shared interest, that there is a bit of energy between the two of you, and they're the ones you hold on to, and constantly check in with them at worse, once every 3 months. Hey, and don't just ring up to say, hey, do you want to sell your house? You got to ring up with something of value and go, well, look, hey, just want to let you know there's been a great sale down the street from you, even if it's not yours, or the market's gone up, 10%. Here's a graph. Here's a stat I found on PropTrack or, CoreLogic. So, check in with people and, be their trusted advisor and do the boring work. It's so boring. It's relentless. And when you don't have those 400 contacts that are your special people, you've got to cold call and you've got to do the old fashioned stuff. You've got to knock on doors. And I'm a true believer in that. And people say, oh, it doesn't work anymore. No, it does. Prospecting is everything. If you don't prospect as an agent, even as a principal, you still have to do the work. And, I struggle with that sometimes because there's a lot of admin that comes in when you're a principal. There's a lot of trust accounting. There's a lot of other stuff. And the moment you let go of that routine, you're gone. You're out the door. And, the other great bit of advice I was given when I started was just get through the first 18 months. It's going to be hell. Do the work, do the boring stuff, do the stuff you don't want to do for 18 months. And if you still don't make it, then you can sort of go and leave if you want to. But just give it 18 months. Yeah, and if you generally the ones that get through and start building their 400 connections, or some people do 300. some people do 500. And at any one time, 5% of those people are considering a sale. And it's not rocket science. If you make it too complicated, if you make it too busy, and I'm going to try this and I'm going to use AI and I'm going to, no, they want to hear from you. They don't want to hear some AI guy. That's why I think that's one way to lose business. Anyway, but it's got to be you. It can't be your assistant. It's got to be you on the phone. Oh, Rory, how you going? How are the kids? How the operation go? Like, you've got to keep that up. The moment you lose that, another agent's going to move in and start that relationship. And it's being front of mind. If you're not front of mind, you're gone. Yeah.
It's good advice. It seems to be some consistent advice across the board, that one.
Yeah.
All the tried and tested methods continue to work. Get distracted by a lot of things.
Yeah, don't get distracted.
Before we wrap up,
do
you have an off-market or a quiet listing now that you'd like to share with us? Street, area, why it's good?
Yeah, we've got a cracker in Bluefin Court, which is a very popular street in Noosa Waters for people downsizing or wanting a low maintenance property. Maybe they've sold a big house in Noosa Waters, Sunshine Beach, and they want to downsize to a duplex. The street is basically all duplexes that are low maintenance, but really well built, essential. You can walk to Noosa markets, you can walk to restaurants, the river. The body corporates are pretty much non-existent because they're duplexes. It's basically just covering insurance. And, it's perfect for downsizers or a young family or investors. Yeah. So that's coming on the market we did the video yesterday. It's coming on probably in 3 or 4 days with luck. Yeah. But it's a beauty. And there's a lot of people looking for downsizers.
Good street. You need to be putting the Christmas lights up in that street.
You do. It's got a great culture, that street. It's got a great energy. Yeah. We drive down there at Christmas. We take the kids. They love it. It's one of the best streets for that at Christmas time. Yeah. They get in the spirit. You're going to love that.
Very good. The last thing that we want to do is we want to ask you a question for the next agent to jump on the podcast. So what question would you have for someone else who's going to come on next time? Feel free to put them on the spot. And then after you answer that, after you give us that question, I'll ask you the question that the last agent gave us for you.
Okay. What is the craziest request you've ever been asked from a vendor for one of your properties?
Okay. That'll be opening up a can of worms potentially. Very good.
I'll tell you one of mine. Oh God. Anyway, that's for another.
The question for you from the last agent is: whereabouts in the Noosa Shire is going to be the next most hottest part of the market in the next 12 months?
That's a great question. It's a good question. I think. Look, I honestly think there's going to be some opportunities because the bottom end of the market, we did a study the other week, like the Tawantons, the Karoi Bar, they have outdone Sunshine Beach in capital gains in the last year and a half, believe it or not, or since COVID, believe it or not. Sunshine Beach is just getting back to where it was, just a bit over at the peak in COVID, whereas Tawanton, Karoi Bar, all those suburbs are well beyond the heights of COVID. So they've got a little bit expensive. So, markets like Sunshine, Sunrise, Castaways, the eastern beaches, which the gap between those cheaper suburbs and those more expensive suburbs has decreased. So if people spend another couple of $100, $300, they could actually get into, a location like the eastern beaches. And that gap has never been so small to get back into the upper end. So I think the lower end of the eastern beaches is going to go gangbusters. And I think the days of getting, there'll be a window where you can probably still get something for 1.5. Now the buy-in now for Tawanton is 1.3. So that's a $200,000 gap. That was a lot bigger 2 years ago. It was more like 500,000. Now it's only 200. So I think the bottom end of eastern beaches will go up basically and go up probably 300,000-400,000 in the next sort of year and a half. That's my prediction. Good. It's a crazy prediction, but
you've heard it here first.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say specific areas or streets. I'm just going to keep it general. But I think that bottom end of the eastern beaches will go into the twos faster than we think.
Very good.
I could be wrong.
You could be wrong. We'll wait and see, and I'll hold you to it in 6
And
months'
always,
time.
if in doubt, Atunga Heights. That's
There
the
you go.
street. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's leave it there for now. Thanks for your time and coming on the podcast, Rory. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Yes, pleasure. No, it's been great, mate. Thank you very much. And we love working with you guys. So always happy to come on and have a chat.
Very good. Thanks to everyone out there for tuning in. Don't forget to follow the podcast On the Ground on Spotify. See you next time.
Cheers. See you, mate. Bye.